Today on Art Comes Alive, we'll take a look at art and science and how the two intersect. That is, artists who are inspired by science in their work, or scientists who create works of art. It could be a blurry line for a lot of these creators. With the coronavirus pandemic in mind, we'll show you the work of artists who are inspired by the microscopic world of microbes, cells, and yes, viruses. Then we'll take you to an exhibit of over 100 artists whose work is inspired by the battle to fight global warming. But don't worry, the show isn't all about global catastrophe. For our last story, we'll keep it light as we take a look at the Guthman musical instrument competition at Georgia Tech, where inventors have created and performed new and strange musical instruments. All this on Art Comes Alive, starting right now. During the summer of 2019, the CDC Museum featured an exhibit entitled The World Unseen: Intersections of Art and Science. It included works by artists that focused on cells, microbes, and viruses. In light of the coronavirus pandemic that began spreading across the globe by the end of 2019, this exhibit almost seemed like a prescient warning. But it still reminds us that there's beauty even in the things that terrify us. This is a video installation piece by the artist Scott Chmielewski. These haunting fast-motion video images show bacteria growing in petri dishes. This is a 5-foot diameter installation piece called Collisions by Amy Esslinger, an Atlanta-based artist whose work emphasizes cellular interactions. Her work blurs the line between painting and sculpture. A dizzying amalgamation of painted paper, balsa wood, foam core, even false eyelashes. But perhaps the most poignant collection of the exhibit was this series by Ruth Cuthand, an artist of Plains, Cree, and Scottish descent. Each image depicts a disease Europeans brought to the New World, decimating the indigenous population. This is measles. This is smallpox. This is whooping cough. This is typhoid fever. This is tuberculosis. This is polio. The artist uses beads as her medium to remind the viewer that Europeans traded cheap beads like these to indigenous peoples. But the Europeans were also trading these deadly diseases, which decimated the indigenous population of the Americas. The artist Laura Splan also explored the Baroque and elegant beauty of viruses, but this time in the form of doilies. Doilies are quaint relics of a bygone era, but here, they are rendered into the chilling form of viruses that have plagued mankind and have killed millions. This is influenza, HIV, SARS, herpes, hepatitis. This is an installation piece by Laurie Fredette, entitled Nowhere Else Exists. The shape and placement of these pods make poetic reference to travel-related diseases like malaria, yellow fever, and typhoid. At first glance, these works may seem whimsical, yet they often represent chilling and deadly threats that are invisible to the naked eye. And with the coronavirus pandemic raging and commanding attention, these artists have been exploring this invisible world while most of us have been oblivious. Until now. And finally, it should be noted that the CDC's museum has been temporarily closed, of course, due to the coronavirus. If that wasn't scary enough, we'll show you another exhibit that explores another looming global challenge: global warming. Over 100 artists participated in this exhibit, sponsored by the Women's Caucus for Art of Georgia. The art of this exhibit was varied, but it all involved artists' concerns about global warming. Some artists simply expressed the beauty of the natural world that we're losing to global warming. Others were more focused on the dystopian landscape we're replacing it with. Callahan McDonough, on the left, is the chair of the Art and Activism for the Women's Caucus for Art of Georgia and the curator of the exhibit.
Art historically has always made a difference, if you think about it. I don't know if you know Picasso's Guernica, but artists have always been involved politically. I was involved in the resurgence of the feminist movement in the 70s, and the art very much was about drawing attention to women having a voice, women having equity. The art is visceral and experienced by people and opens people to the other spheres of learning related to whatever social justice issue is being worked on. In this case, climate. This draws people's attention. They get an experience of what I had said when I put the call for art out is I wanted artists to think about either the beauty of the earth or the potential damage. I love the diversity because I think that people really did take my request when I put the call for art out about either celebrating nature or looking at what could be the dire circumstances we could end up in, which would be a world that is uninhabitable. I think that it reflects that combination of urgency and hope.
I actually heard about this show from a friend of mine, an artist in Colombia, who just sent me a link to this call for artists, and she said, you need to, enter your work in this show because it was about global warming. And when I saw the call for entry, I really didn't know much about this group. I was so excited because, this is the Women's Caucus for Art of Georgia, and it's all about art and activism. And I felt like this would be a great opportunity because I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with my art. I'm trying to have a message that is beyond just a pretty picture that you see on the wall, but that there's a message behind it. It means something and it's important. And so I feel like a show like this is a very important show, and it's a great way for artists to be involved with that greater conversation in the community. I had recently finished a piece that I created in response to a movie that I saw called Chasing Coral, which was all about the bleaching of the coral reefs in our oceans. And when I saw the piece, I was particularly moved at one point where the scientists, the divers, were underwater, and they saw something happening with the coral that they'd never seen before. It was actually glowing. And they figured out later that what that was really, it was like the coral's last breath. It was crying out for help. And it's almost like it just mustered all the energy that it had to scream for notice before it died. And just the realization that there is so much going on that I would just say, like, humanity, as we live our lives, busy, running around, doing things on the surface of our planet, there's a whole world going on in the ocean that we aren't even aware of most of the time. We have no idea that, there are coral that are dying and they need our help. And some of the things that we're doing are contributing to the problems that they're facing. So I was just very moved by that movie, and I wanted to create a piece. It is inspired by coral, and so while this isn't supposed to look exactly like a coral reef, it is supposed to just look organic and like maybe something that you might find underwater. And I wanted to incorporate light features, not so much as the screaming of the coral, as much as I think of light as a symbol of hope. And, I think that we are going to solve all of these problems. I have great faith in humanity to do the right thing and to find answers and to solve problems. And so I would hope that people would look at this piece, and maybe if they come up close, they might be able to figure out what some of the objects are that I've used. I have some disposable contact lens cases that a friend of mine collected for a year. And these orbs, glowing orbs that I have, are deconstructed milk jugs. And so maybe people come up, they won't know what it is at first, but hopefully they'll be able to figure it out and then step back and just see it as an organic form.
I've been working with macro photography now for a good 10 or 15 years and have gotten very interested in in the small little world of trees. And when we walk through a forest, we walk by trees, we really don't see them. And so when you take time to stop and look, there's a whole world that's waiting for you there. And so I'll often go out into the woods with my camera and tripod, and I'll spend half an hour with one tree. And so I feel like it's really connecting to the subtlety of what's already there. And so I'm really interested in patterns and in structure of lichen and in bark. You know, trees, lichen is actually impacted by pollution, and they are the bellwether for climate. And so when you start seeing trees in distress, you begin to realize there's something going on here. I think artists have the opportunity to express something that's not quantifiable. We know there's the science, we know there's all the data, but what does it mean to us as humans to be living in a world where we have the potential to become extinct, in which we are actually destroying our whole ecosystem? And I think artists have the opportunity to tell that story in a way, in a graphic manner, that affects us at a gut level, whereas a lot of the science reaches us in our head. But if we can connect to people to the images of what our world would be like, it awakens us to something we normally don't want to see or don't want to think about.
The Hebrew Union College in New York City had a call for art for a show called Terra Infirma, which is the sick earth. So it was all about global warming and from a Jewish perspective, but a universal perspective. So I decided to do some research. And we go to Mr. Google, and I put in acronyms or scientific, research people doing work on climate change. And out came all these acronyms and places in the United States and government all over that were doing research on what was happening to the earth. And so I said that could be a beautiful grid for using that background and putting the acronyms with cutout letters, because I do cutout work. But it became almost like an obsession, because there are 144 acronyms in that piece. And artists are like the canary in the cave. They may see something earlier, or they observe, and we live in such a technical world where you sit at a computer, or, but I think it's an expression. We're very creative, we take a risk. And art is a way to communicate. And so I hope that all the art in this show is, if you look at it, it's so different. There's no two that are alike.
We're at the Georgia Perimeter College at this amazing show about global warming, Earth One. And I have so many friends who have pieces in this show, and this is such a powerful show about what's happening to the planet now and what has been happening to the planet. The pieces are powerful, big messages, very important messages, and there's sculpture here, there's art, there's photography, multimedia, and it's really, really well done.
I think the beautiful thing about art, film, painting, all of it is that it can portray a world that doesn't exist at this moment. So it can show a world that used to be, it can show a world that exists right now, and it can show the potential of what could happen. And I think you'll find in the work here tonight, there's work that shows a potential of what could happen if things work out and we're able to do something and reverse, global warming. And I think there's pieces in here that are more pessimistic and show the horrors of what could happen if we don't take action.
After the break, we'll take you to the Guthman Musical Instrument Competition, where artists and inventors have invented new and often strange musical instruments. The Guthman Musical Instrument Competition is an annual event held in the spring at Georgia Tech and is definitely worth checking out. And it's free and open to the public. Jason Freeman is a professor in the School of Music at Georgia Tech.
Sure. So the Guthman Musical Instrument Competition is an international competition identifying and celebrating the best new musical instruments in the world. We had over 100 applicants from 21 countries. From that, we narrowed down to a pool of 9 finalists. They have been on campus for 2 days. They share their work with internationally renowned judges, presenting the technical and musical features of these new instruments and kind of the motivations behind them, where they want to take them. And then we give out $10,000 in prizes to the 3 best instruments selected by our judges. The weekend culminates first with the fair that we're at now, but then after that, with a concert at the First Center for the Arts here at Georgia Tech, where we feature these instruments on stage side by side with local Atlanta musicians performing together to an audience, really trying to promote what technology can do to musical expression and musical performance, how it can help us do things that we've never been able to do before and express things musically that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
The exhibition was like the laboratory of a musical mad scientist. The room was filled with strange-looking and sounding devices. I spoke with one inventor who described his invention.
So this is the dyno, which stands for directionally nuanced orbital. It's a MIDI controller instrument that allows you to play discrete pitches, but also allows you to affect the sound based on the motion sensors that are inside. So you can go.
But the exhibition room was only part of the overall event. 10 finalists were chosen and invited to collaborate with Atlanta musicians and demonstrate how their instruments work.
Sometimes they'll both be performing together on one of our new instruments. Sometimes the local musician will be playing a traditional instrument alongside with a new one. And sometimes they'll actually be doing some kind of strange hybrid of the two.
One trend the organizers hadn't counted on was that several of the finalists had developed their technologies to open up musical worlds to those with either developmental challenges or physical handicaps.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got, we're in thousands of schools, we've got probably over 10,000 users, and everything from young people with autism, maybe students with cerebral palsy who are playing in band and be able to play in orchestras, families at home just having fun making music, individuals with Down syndrome. I just got a message of the week, a student over here in a school who's now able to play flute in the marching band who's Down syndrome because she's got Scooter. That's something she can play and she can take ownership of.
So this year, one of the focuses of the competition, something that just we happened to notice when we narrowed down to our pool of finalists, is that about half the instruments in the competition being featured at the concert are ones that really have a universal design element to them. They're designed to be accessible to anyone to make music, regardless of their age, regardless of their previous musical experience and talent, and regardless of their ability. If they have a disability or something that might be preventing them from performing on a traditional musical instrument.
Another instrument that falls in this category is called the Jambox.
It was invented by David Whalen, who was paralyzed from the neck down in a skiing accident when he was 19 years old, and has spent years trying to figure out how he can make music again, and developed a harmonica, because you don't need your hands to play harmonica, but this is a digital harmonica that has a ton of special features. So it senses your breath as you're sucking or you're blowing into it, but then it also sends that digital information to an app that he's written on a computer, which turns it into the sound of any instrument you might possibly want, or plays in any scale or any chord or any kind of mapping, so that you can play electric guitar with distortion, or you can make it sound like a flute, or you can make it sound like a harmonica if you want. You can kind of do anything and do it anyway.
The inventor of the Jambox couldn't attend the competition, so he sent his friend, Atlanta-based musician Chelsea Shagg, to demonstrate.
I'm going to demonstrate, but please keep in mind, I received this instrument yesterday, and I am kind of terrible at it. But I would love to demonstrate. If Dave was here, he would slay it, I'm sure. All right, I'm going to put this mic down. I'm going to give you G, and I'm just going to jam for a second. Y'all can hear me?
The annual competition aims to identify cutting-edge musical ideas, those that reflect innovation in design, engineering, and performance. And yet one among them was named the most pioneering.
It is my honor to announce the first place winner, and just very excited about that, and that is Bosco.
I played Talkbox. My background is a music production, music producer. I played Talkbox on records from Snoop to E40 to Kanye West, Tupac and the Outlaws. But every time I wanted to play live, it was always difficult because you have all of these pieces. You have an amp, a tube, a keyboard. It's all plugged in. It's hard to talk with it in your mouth. So it's just, I wanted to make it easier to perform. And to perform live. So I went through this accelerator called Zoo Labs in Oakland, and I went through this futures workshop, and we thought about where's the music business going, in 5 years, and this was like 6 years ago, and we saw this trend where studios are getting smaller, and they've gone from big studios to desktop computers to the laptop, and we saw it going to the phone. So we said, how can we put ourselves in the future? And so we want to make this Talkbox work with the phone, make it mobile, and then we can do any kind of user interface that we want on the phone and make it unique and easier to play for people who don't know how to play keyboard. So there are all these opportunities, and that's what we did. We jumped on it and went for it.
So, I know you guys are wondering what the heck is going on up here. And besides Craig King making some incredible music on the piano, give it up for Craig King. And DJ Didactic, bringing in all the beats. So this is the Electrospit ESX1 Talkbox. The sound comes from your phone. You can use a keyboard or a guitar. It goes into the device, and you don't talk or sing or not even whisper. You just open your mouth and press a note. Wow, 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 wow. You can see it's turning my mouth into a speaker. So, wow, 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 wow. And you don't even need to know how to play.
The way that it works is the sound comes out of the sound source, which in this case is an iPhone, but it can be a guitar or a keyboard, or you can control it with any MIDI controller. So it's audio that's coming out. So that sound is, if I hit this key, you can hear it's vibrating my throat and turning my mouth into a speaker. So, and then I control that sound with my mouth. Wow, 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 wow. And so what we did was, once we came up with the technology, we had to do the industrial design to make it look nice. We had to figure out how it should fit different people's necks. there are all these challenges around how, we wanted to put all this power to make it loud enough. Then we had to create a user interface that took advantage of this small space that you could play melodies, because a lot of user interfaces on the phone, it's hard to play melodies, but with this one, I can play a scale. I can play California Love. I can, I can freestyle. So, there's so much you can do with an app, and then you can connect it to hardware, and then you have something magical.
Thanks for watching. Go to aibtv.com/donate to support programming like this. Your contributions may be tax deductible.